about 3 myths regarding African slavery. The reason this is important is because if you've ever brought up the transatlantic slave trade to an American or European, often you'll hear things like, oh, Africans sold their own people, or things like, for instance, oh, slavery was always practiced in Africa. And often these comments are pretty much made to kind of justify the transatlantic slave trade because the idea is Africans were equally responsible for it. And I want to debunk that. So let's look at a couple of things first of all. The first myth I want to talk about is the idea that Africans sold their own people. And this is actually quite laughable because, yes, obviously Africans did sell other Africans, but there was no Pan-African identity at the time. Saying Africans sold their own people is not true because what was done is certain groups would capture members of another group and sell those people. Still absolutely horrendous, but saying that they sold their own people is kind of like saying when Germany invaded Austria or invaded Russia, Germany was invading itself. It was invading its own people because, you know, all these people are European. But of course we recognize that Germany, Austria, and Russia are separate groups and that we don't use that kind of language. So why do we use it when it comes to Africans that are of many different groups? Africans did not sell their own people. They did not sell like their family members or friends or anything like that. They sold others from other groups, which is horrible, but that is just simply a lie that they sold their own people. The second thing I also want to talk about is this idea that all the slave trade that was being done by that the Africans were selling, all the slaves that the Africans were selling, was completely voluntary. And in the book Black Marxism by Walter Rodney points out that, yes, of course, there was a time period where different African groups were willingly selling slaves to Europeans, but at a certain point, when they tried selling anything else, cash crops or even light manufacturing, Europeans refused to buy these products because they didn't want any competition with their domestic markets. The Europeans pretty much imposed these unequal trade relations where Africa would have to continue to sell slaves even if they didn't want to. So, you know, not all of this was done voluntarily. Often it was done under pressure in unequal trade relations between Europeans and Africans. And the third thing I want to talk about is just this idea that, like, you know, slavery was always practiced in Africa. First of all, not all societies did it. But the other thing is also is where slavery was done is never been done to the extent that slavery was done in Brazil or the American South. It was not hereditary, for instance, for the most part. It was not as grueling for the most part. Some slaves, for instance, could rise in rank and actually be able to buy their freedom. And again, slavery is horrible, but it was never, in no African economy was as dependent on slaves as the so-called New World was. So there you go. Those are some myths I want to debunk regarding African slavery. Let me know if you've heard any other myths in the comments and what you think of this. Thank you so much.
America's first execution wasn't a witch. It was a black woman named Dinah. In the 1700s in South Carolina, Dinah was a healer. She gave slaves powerful herbs in secret, ancient knowledge passed down through generations in Africa. She taught them how to endure, how to heal their lashes, how to find strength when their masters tried to break them. That was her rebellion, the punishment. They tied her to a stake, piled wood at her feet, and burned her alive. Her screams filled the colony while her flesh blistered and peeled in front of the crowd. But the colonizers, they tell you those stories because witches are entertainment. Dinah's medicine was resistance. That's why they buried her name. That's why they called her a witch. It was never sorcery. It was science. It was our ancestors' truth. And that truth was too powerful to let survive. But one herb survived through stories, through memory. Rhodiola rosea, the warrior's herb. It turned stress into strength, gave stamina to the broken, and power to the dreamers who refused to bow. That was the real reason they called her a witch. Not because she was casting spells, but because she was giving her people power. And power was dangerous. Through our strength we endured, and our history survived. Rhodiola gives power for the hustlers, dreamers, and doers, and sharpens the mind when the world tries to wear you down. Right now, a small black-owned company is bringing it back. For us. By us. They hid this knowledge from you on purpose. If the orange card is still on your screen, grab it now before they try to bury this again, and reclaim another part of our lost history.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the people of New Orleans called her Mother Catherine. To them, she was a living saint. She was born Nanny Cowens in Kentucky around 1874. Sometime in her early life, she was denied healing because of her skin color. That rejection did not break her. and she vowed that she'd become the type of healer that no one would be turned away from. She moved to New Orleans in the 1920s and founded a movement in the lower Ninth Ward. She opened her Temple of Innocent Blood. It was a church, it was a refuge, and it was a spiritual safe haven where the lost and rejected could find help. She took in pregnant girls who were outcasted by their families, abused women, orphans, the sick, the mentally unwell, people of all backgrounds, including white women who would come in secret. Dressed in all white, she led services of song and spirit. Her sermons were said to make grown men cry. People also came because she was a legitimate healer. She healed sicknesses, always knew the truth, and could prophesy. One of the most powerful aspects of her church was that it was completely interracial. This, during the Jim Crow era, where something as simple as sharing a lunch counter could turn into violence. She codified people through acceptance and healing. She mixed the Bible with African spiritual knowledge. Along with personal revelations, she brought messages filled with hope and fire. People came from all over the South to witness her grand displays, be affected by them, or even just feel like they were close to God. There are numerous stories about her touch. One of those is about a woman with a twisted back. She came into the church and walked out healed after Mother Catherine whispered a psalm over her. Another is of a child who stopped breathing but then came back to life after Mother Catherine prepared a spiritual bath for him. She was also said to have lifted the sorrow completely from a man who came in deep in grief, with a single touch. In her final months, she foretold of her own passing. But she told her congregation to not mourn because she'd be even more powerful in spirit than in the flesh. When she did pass away, she was laid in state and thousands came to see her. Even afterwards, people still claim to see her in candle flames, hear her voice leading them in dreams, and feeling her presence in times when they need her in moments of fear and grief. She's a cornerstone of the Black spiritual Southern resistance, and someone who provided a safe space for those who did not have one at a time when they really needed one. So if you ever travel to New Orleans in the Ninth Ward, you might still feel her. Maybe protecting, maybe healing, maybe working.
Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. Divine all blessed greetings and salutations. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, supported, and brought to you by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. Inspired by National Voodoo Days in Benin and led by the local Black community members, New Orleans International Voodoo Day is a day of collective remembrance and spiritual reparation that is preceded by a symposium and includes a procession to the monuments at the sites of slavery in New Orleans, a ritual to account for and seek absolution for the city's and the country's participation in the institution of slavery, homage to those ancestors who suffered through and survived the transatlantic slave trade, and honor and appreciation for the achievements of those who came out of this great oppression. 2 days for education, creative expression, elevation, cultural exchange, and above all, healing. May 23rd and May 24th, 2026. Through authentic voodoo traditions handed down through generations, we offer a path to healing from the ongoing ramifications of slavery and racism present in today's modern United States. And we're certainly grateful and appreciative of those of you who continue to join us and support us here on this platform for our 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday podcast. We're certainly grateful for you showing up and participating in the live chat. Britt Brat Dash, greetings and salutations to you and yours. Our beloved Daniel Neal, we certainly appreciate your continued presence, light, and support. Elijah Joseph Dupas, we certainly appreciate you and your energy and your local attendance showing up for this podcast. And certainly my godchild, D Goddess, blessings to you and yours. And we will shortly unmute our beloved Bianca Johnson Plessy, team member and community member, Sister Toni Val Martinez, Elder Reggie, known on this platform as Green Soap, leader and founder of Shrine of the White Cloth, team member and participant, and our beloved Joshua Nylan Tanner, armor bearer, wild man. We certainly appreciate your continued attendance and support. Tonight, I want to introduce the last of the Voodoos. In the death of Jean Martinez at the age of nearly 100 years, New Orleans lost at the end of August the most extraordinary African character that ever gained celebrity within her limits. This article was written and produced in 1885. Harper's Weekly, November 7th, 1885. Jean Montanet or Jean Laficille or Jean Latene or Jean Racine, Jean Grigri or Jean Macaco or Jean Bayou, Voodoo John, Bayou John, Dr. John might well have been termed the last of the Voodoos. Not that the strange association with which he was affiliated had ceased to exist with his death, but that he was the only last really important figure of a long line of wizards and witches whose African titles were recognized and who exercised an influence over the colored population. Swarthy occultists will doubtless continue to elicit their queens and high priests through years to come, but the influence of the public school is gradually dissipating all faith in witchcraft, and no Black hierophant now remains capable of manifesting such mystique, knowledge, or inspiring such respect as Voodoo John exhibited and compelled. There will never be another Rose, another Marie Laveau, much less another Jean Bayou. It may reasonably be doubted whether any other Negro of African birth who lived in the South had a more extraordinary career than that of Jean Montanet. He was a native of Senegal and claimed to have been a prince's son, in proof of which he was wont to call attention to a number of parallel scars on his cheeks, extending in curves from the edge of either temple to the corner of his lips. This fact seems to me partly confirmatory of his statement, as Beringer Farrar dwells at some length on the fact that the Bambaras, who are probably the finest Negro race in Senegal, all wear such disfigurements. The scars are made by gashing the cheeks during infancy and are considered a sign of race. Three parallel scars mark the free men of the tribe. Four distinct their captives or slaves. Now Jean's face had, I am told, three scars, which would prove him a free-born Bambara, or at least a member of some free tribe allied to the Bambaras and living upon their territory. At all events, Jean possessed physical characteristics answering to those by which French ethnologists in Senegal distinguished the Bambaras. He was of middle height, very strongly built, with broad shoulders, well developed muscles, and inky black skin, retreating forehead, small bright eyes, a very flat nose, and a woolly beard, gray only during the last few years of his long life. He had a resonant voice and a very authoritative manner. At an early age, he was kidnapped by Spanish slavers who sold him at some Spanish port, which he was ultimately shipped to Cuba. His West Indian master taught him to be an excellent cook, ultimately became attached to him, and made him a present of his freedom. John soon afterwards engaged on some Spanish vessel as a ship's cook, and in the exercise of this calling, voyaged considerably in both hemispheres. Finally, tiring of the sea, he left his ship at New Orleans and began life on shore as a cotton roller. His physical strength gave him considerable advantage above his fellow blacks, and his employers also discovered that he wielded some peculiar occult influence over the Negroes, which made him valuable as an overseer or gang leader. John, in short, possessed the mysterious Obi power, the existence of which has been recognized in most slave-holding communities, with which many a West Indian planter has been compelled by force of circumstance to effect a compromise. Accordingly, John was permitted many liberties which other blacks, although free, would never have presumed to take. Soon it became rumored that he was a seer of no small powers, and that he could tell the future by the marks upon bales of cotton. I have never been able to learn the depths of this queer method of telling fortunes, but John became so successful in the exercise of it that thousands of colored people flocked to him for predictions and counsel. And even white people, moved by curiosity or by doubt, paid him to prophesy for them. Finally, he became wealthy enough to abandon the levee and purchase a large tract of property on Bayou Road, where he built a house. His land extended from Puer Street on the Bayou Road as far as Roman, covering the greater portion of an extensive square now well built up. In those days, it was a marshy green plain with a few scattered habitations. At his new home, John continued the practice of fortune telling, but combined it with the profession of Creole medicine and arts of still more mysterious. By and by, his reputation became so great that he was able to demand and obtain immense fees. People of both races, both sexes, thronged to see him, many coming even from faraway Creole towns in the parishes, and well dressed women, closely veiled, often knocked at his door. Parties paid for $10 to $20 for advice, for herb medicines, for recipes to make their hair grow, for cataplasms supposed to possess mysterious virtues, but really made with scraps of shoe leather tri- triturated into paste, for advice what ticket to buy in the Havana lottery, or for aid to recover stolen goods, for love powers, for counsel in family troubles, for charms by which to obtain revenge upon an enemy. Once John received a fee of $50 for a potion. It was water, he said to a Creole confidant, with some common herbs boiled in it. I hurt nobody, but if folks want to give me $50, I take the $50 every time. His office furniture consisted of a table, a chair, a picture of the Virgin Mary, an elephant tusk, some shells which he said were African shells, and enabled him to read the future, and a pack of cards in which a small hole had been burned. About his person, he always carried two small bones wrapped around with a black string, which bones he really appeared to rever as fetishes. Wax candles were burned during his performances, and as he bought a whole box of them every few days during flush times, one can imagine how large the number of his clients must have been. They poured money into his hands so generously that he became worth at least $50,000. The in, then indeed did this possible son of Bambara prince begin to live more grandly than any black potentate of Senegal. He had his carriage and a pair, worthy of a planter, and his bloodied saddle horse, which he rode well, attired in a gaudy Spanish costume, and seated up an elaborately decorated Mexican saddle. At home, where he ate and drank only the best, scorning claret worth less than $1 the liter, he continued to find his simple furniture good enough for him, but he had at least 15 wives, a harem worthy of Babacour Segu. White folks might have called them by at least honorific names, but Jean declared them his legitimate spouses according to African ritual. One of the curious features in modern slavery was the ownership of blacks by freedmen of their own color. And those Negro slaveholders were usually savage and merciless masters, according to the author of the document. Jean was not, however, distribute lagresse among the colored population of his neighborhood in the shape of food, bowls of, wait a minute, y'all, please forgive me. John was not, but was by right of slave purchase that he obtained most of his wives, but bore him children in great multitude. Finally, he managed to woo and win a white woman of the lowest class who might have been, after a fashion, the Sultana Valide of the Saraglio. On grand occasions, John used to distribute lagresse among the colored populace of his neighborhood in the shape of food, bowls of gumbo, or dishes of jambalaya. He did it for the popularity's sake in those days, perhaps, but in after years during the great epidemics, he did it for the charity, even when so much reduced in circumstances that he himself obliged to cook the food to be given away. And as I close the reading for today, but John's greatness did not fail to entail certain cares. He did not know what to do with his money. He had no faith in banks and had seen too much of the darker side of life to have much faith in human nature. For many years, he kept his money underground, buying or taking it up at night, burying it underground, and taking it up at night only occasionally, concealing large sums so well that he could never find them again himself. And now, after many years, people still believe there are treasures entombed somewhere in the neighborhood of Prayer Street and Bayou Road. All business negotiations of a serious character caused him much worry, and he found many willing to take advantage of his ignorance. He probably felt small remorse for certain questionable actions of his own. He was notoriously a bad pay, and part of his property was seized at last to cover a debt. Then, in an evil hour, he asked a man without scruples to teach him how to write, believing the financial misfortunes were mostly due to ignorance of the alphabet. After he had learned to write his name, he was innocent enough one day to place his signature on a request at the bottom of a blank sheet of paper, and lo, his real estate passed then from his possession in some horribly mysterious way. And still, he had some money left and made heroic efforts to retrieve his fortunes. He bought other property and he invested desperately in lottery tickets. The lottery craze finally came upon him and had far more to do with his ultimate ruin than losses in the grocery, the sugar maker's shop, and other establishments in which he had put several $1,000s as the silent partner of people who cheated him. He might certainly have continued to make a good living since people still sent for him to cure them with herbs or went to see him to have their fortunes told. But all his earnings were wasted in tempting fortune. After a score of seizures and a long succession of evictions, he was at last obligated to seek hospitality from some of his numerous children, and all of he had once owned. Nothing remained to him but his African shells, his elephant's tusk, and the sewing machine table that had served him to tell fortunes and to burn wax candles upon. And even those, I think, were attached a day or two before his death, which occurred at the house of his daughter by the white wife, an intelligent mulatto with many children of her own. Jean's ideas of religion were primitive in the extreme. The conversation of the chief tribes of Senegal to The conversion of the chief tribes of Senegal to Islam occurred in recent years, and it is probable that at the time he was captured by slavers, his people were still in a condition little above gross fetishism. If during his years of servitude in a Catholic colony had imbibed some notions of Roman Christianity, it is certain at least that the Christian ideals were always subordinate to the African ideals, just as the image of Virgin Mary was used by him merely as an auxiliary fetish in his witchcraft, and was considered as possessing much less power than the elephant's tooth. He was in many respects a humbug, but he may have sincerely believed in the efficacy of certain superstitious rites of his own. He stated that he had a master whom he had bound to obey, that he could read the will of his master in the twinkling of the stars, and often of clear nights the neighbors used to watch him standing alone at some street corner, staring at the welkin, pulling his woolly beard, and talking in an unknown language to some imaginary being. And whether John indulged in this freak, people knew that he needed money badly and would probably try to borrow a dollar or two from someone in the vicinity nearby. Testimony to his remarkable skill in the use of herbs could be gathered from nearly every one now living who became well acquainted with him. And during the epidemic of 1878, which uprooted the old belief in the total immunity of Negroes and colored people from yellow fever, two of John's children were taken down. I have no money, he said, but I can cure my children, which he proceeded to do with the aid of some weeds plucked from the edge of the poor street gutters. One of the herbs, I'm told, was what our Creoles call parasol. The children were playing on the banquette the next day, said my informant. And Montanet, even in the most unlucky part of his career, retained the superstitions, reverence of colored people in all parts of the city. When he made his appearance, even on the American side of Canal Street, to doctor some sick people, there was always some subdued excitement about the colored folk, who whispered and stared a great deal, but were careful not to raise their voices where they said, "There's Hoodoo John," that an unlettered African slave should have been able to achieve what Jean Bayou achieved in a civilized society, and to earn the wealth and reputation that he enjoyed during many years of his life, might be cited as a singular evidence of modern popular credulity. But it also proved that John was not an ordinary man in point of natural intelligence. And as I unmute my beloved co-host, please come on in, Bianca Johnson Plessy, Sister Toni Val Martinez, Elder Reggie Green Oak, and Brother Joshua Nylan Tanner. Kios O'Day.
Hello, good evening, everyone. How y'all doing? People in the listening audience. I
Good
wonder,
evening.
in reading all of that about all the children, are any of those children still in New Orleans today? The actual children, everybody and their auntie claim to be kin to Marie Laveau, but I've never heard anybody say they were kin to Dr. John. So I wonder if any of the many children he had still remained in New Orleans, or did they move on? What say you, Elder Reggie?
Yeah. Peace, Sister Toni, Divine Prince. Always a great show. Sister Bianca, Brother Joshua, and the collective audience. I done a deep dive on this guy. Couldn't find a lot on him. It's hard to find his family due to all, as Divine Prince read, all the last names he had. I even tried to raise him in a Misa to speak with him because I know how to do that. I just couldn't get a read on him. Wow, I just don't have info on him, Sister Toni.
Me either. I always just basically, to tell the truth, I just overlooked him.
Mm-hmm.
I just overlooked them. Well, we know we had a white musician here in the city that took the name Dr. John, and whenever anybody brought up Dr. John, that was the first person I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of hard to find any solid information, but the Divine Prince did give some good information.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, about as much as you can find out on him by saying where he lived at. And while he was saying where he lived at, I was picturing that in my mind off of
Mm-hmm.
Bayou Road and wondering, do he still got some money buried down up in there? But a lot of black people buried money in their
Mm-hmm.
yards because one, banks would let them deposit it. And if they could, for some reason, get it deposited, they didn't trust the banks.
Mm-mm.
They didn't trust them. They said they could just take our money and leave. So when they say people put money in a mattress, that was true.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
dug holes to hide money in the yard. Hey, Sister Bianca, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself? And how is everybody out there this evening?
Mm-hmm. We blessed.
We all good. You have any thoughts on this issue?
I'm in the same boat too. Which is very surprising to me because when we hear stories about different voodoo priests or priestess or conjuring, we do hear about the main local people like Marie Laveau. But I actually didn't know that Dr. John was a teacher to her because I don't think they really talk about those things, like where she get her learning and stuff. I mean, they probably do, but like you said, we probably just bypass that part. A lot of us just focus on the Marie Laveau and some of the other people, like Aunt Caroline died and all that stuff like that. But I really do think that this is an interesting topic, like knowing that he was listed as father of New Orleans. And like the only thing that I can dig up is that he had, like you say, multiple wives and a couple of children out there, and like you said, I am kind of curious of like is do he still have any family or any relative that's still left around that could be able to tell the story, just anything about him.
Divine Prince, did that article happen to say where he was buried?
No, it doesn't. And I was just thinking also, it would be nice if we had the author, Cody Roberts, who participated in our symposium for Voodoo Day last year. If we had him on the show, because he speaks to some degree as to why he felt Marie Laveau's name sort of got picked up and carried over everyone else's. He also, to some degree, faults or credits, depending on your position, her for sort of the commercialism and uh, diversity of presence, I'll say diplomatically, of folks who are now involved in
Mm-hmm.
voodoo with four O's and even hoodoo. And I would also be curious to know if he does and was able to locate any further documentation or information on Dr. John. I invoke Dr. John as a part of my primary pantheon of deities, particularly
Mm-hmm.
for ritual work, root work, conjure, spirit work, and some defensive work. But I've never, as Elder Reggie also shared, had the information of the download come through. Really about his background, or any lineage that might still be present other than that which we all share, collectively as a community.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sister Toni, on some of the deep dive, I'm sorry, Josh, I'll let you get in, but right quick, on some of the deep dive I've done, he's allegedly supposed to be buried in St. Roch Cemetery. So some years back, I go over there and I was trying to get access to anything, but nothing. We couldn't find the proper name to see what, crypt or wherever he would probably be buried at. It's just so unorganized around him.
Yeah, and he had so many names, which was the actual name that, as we would say, what was his government name?
Right.
Hey, Brother Joshua, how are you tonight?
Good day, everybody. This is Toni, listening artist, Elder Reggie, Bianca, and Divine Prince. That's a very interesting topic. It's very hard to find information on this, on Dr. John, the root worker. I've been looking too. Yeah, it's hard to find anything other than what Divine has sourced and given me. I really haven't found anything on my own. Just keep running into contradictions, like you said, too many different names, and that's probably because all the powers and stuff that he, had. People just started giving him nicknames, and you know how that is, and especially in New Orleans, everybody got a nickname for you. Especially somebody that's doing spiritual work and healings and stuff. You can only imagine the names he had.
I also find it interesting that sort of pattern, forgive me, Sister Toni, that sort of pattern of, discrediting the practitioners while at the same time, validating that they had some particular gift, skill, or talent that just could not be overlooked, and that pattern still exists today.
Yeah, if I could drop a little nugget on what Divine Prince read about him, two things immediately stood out for me. One, when they said he was standing under a street light talking to himself, like coursing through his beard and things of that nature. And to me, he was in communication with his spirit guides. And the second thing Divine Prince brought out in that article, the giving away of food. It's called Saraka. When you give out food to homeless, you give out food to others, it normally equates to blessings coming back in. And so it seems as if Dr. John was practicing both of those methodologies to me from the article that I read. Now, there's a lady. She lived in New Orleans, but she don't live no more. She has a book out on him. It's an interesting read. And I read that. I have that book, and I tried to go through that book to get some leads on him, and I still came up empty.
And I think maybe, they talk, he was on the outskirts of the city, whereas Marie Laveau was in the city. He was on the outskirts. So maybe that made a difference in why people remembered her more than him.
Well, hold on, Sister Toni. But hold on, please. As Divine Prince was reading, he first started out on the levee, the docks, right here on the river, which is inside the city corporation. And then when he got some money, he kind of moved out. But he was on the levee. That's all I'm trying to say. So he got to start in the New Orleans area after coming from Cuba.
But he didn't stay there. Marie Laveau basically stayed there, and her daughter stayed there. But it's also interesting that that he chose to be on the outskirts like that, thinking about the time and thinking about how that area was off Bayou Road at the time. It was like he was trying to get away from everything. And, maybe all of those names was to keep him hid, a lot of different aliases from all his different travels too on the water and in the ports. He may have had a lot of more wives than we know about. Traveling the river and stuff. But he's still a mystery to me.
Ahead.
He's still basically a mystery to me. He was a mystery like the executioner, the black executioner named Congo. He stayed out in that area too. And when I was trying to find information on him, I really couldn't find too much on him either. And just that he was lived in that area. And to me, that area is close enough to town, but still distanced from town.
Yeah, he from as we gather from the article and just stuff we hear about Dr. John, he was a very famous fortune teller. So people came to him. I think his methodology of reading, they said cards and shells. So when the shells came up, I was thinking what they call Delegon, maybe that he picked up in Cuba, because in Cuba they read the 8 cowrie shells and the 16 cowrie shells. And they did, and so I believe he was tapping into the Delegon to give people information at that time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But there's another important thing I picked up tonight. In all the reading I've done on him, I didn't pick it up until tonight. When you're practicing hoodoo, when most people practice hoodoo right now, candles is a big, big part of hoodoo. But burning candles and burning effigies of candles really got his footprint here in the New Orleans area. Marie Laveau done it, but also I see tonight Dr. John burned those candles also. And I that was a real good point for me to pick up on tonight. Candle work. And you see it now, it's prevalent in hoodoo work out there.
Yeah, I just lit my candle today for the first, my 7 African powers. Because today the first. Just lit mine.
That's a big.
And oil lamps.
Well, our time has come to an end.
With herb infusions.
Excuse me?
I said also oil lamps as well, particularly infused oil lamps. But you can continue.
Yes. Well, our time has come to end, and I want to turn it over to Elder Reggie to close us out and to give us any updates on any activities and events. Take it away, Elder Reggie.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Toni. Divine Prince, could you please, there you go, put the ticker tape up for me. Thank you. Our next new moon ritual prayer and application ceremony will be on the new moon, Tuesday, the 21st of October at 6:30 p.m. That location is 710 Cluet. It's a ritual spiritual warfare gathering. Please, anyone in the listening audience, if you're close by and you can drive, come down. It's a very powerful ritual that we get to do with people from other disciplines and other faiths, but also you give us, who's a part of the New Orleans International Voodoo Organization, to have camaraderie, to partake in ritual and work with the spirit. So it is a great event. If you could, please come out. With that, I say, lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. We in this walk together. And before I close out, if we could say a prayer for those who work for the United States government. These people are working without a paycheck right now. And that some of them could be our family members or friends that we have. We don't know where this country is going, but just lift them up in prayer tonight. With that, I say ashe, ashe, ashe. We love you. Good night, everyone.
I say good night, everyone.
Good night. Odabo.
Usher.
Where did Afrocentrism come from? This idea that ancient Egypt and ancient Sudan civilizations were African with black identity. It was actually an Egyptian named Muhammad Ali Dosey. He was a playwright, political activist, and historian born in Alexandria in 1866 to an Egyptian military father and a mother from Sudan's Nuba Mountains. Napoleon had invaded Egypt in 1798, and that moment started Europe's obsession with Egyptian monuments and artifacts. They were literally eating mummies for medicine. Muhammad Ali Dosey was 16 when the British colonized Egypt after defeating Ahmed Arabi's nationalist uprising at Tel el-Kabir. His father was killed that same year, and he was sent to Britain for schooling. From that moment, he was watching the rise of European colonial racist ideologies. At this time, archaeological and historical studies had just started, but the world still didn't talk about the importance of ancient Nile Valley civilization. They were only interested in looting it, and their museums were flooded with these stolen artifacts. In 1911, he becomes the first Egyptian to write about ancient Nile Valley history for a global audience in English and published an influential book called The Land of the Pharaohs. The book was a response to statements made by US President Theodore Roosevelt, who asked British to treat Egyptians and Africans harshly, claiming they were uncivilized, who shouldn't be given freedom or access to education, who are unfit to self-govern. We need to understand that before this book, many people in the United States didn't know that Egypt or Africa had civilizations at all. Following the release of that book, Marcus Garvey came to meet Dosey, and that meeting deeply influenced the development of the early Pan-African thought. It reinforced the belief that Africans were not just primitive tribes roaming jungles, but had real civilizations. This inspired many other Black intellectuals in the West. One of the most prominent was Henry Sylvester Williams, the famous British lawyer and Black rights advocate. In 1920, he debuted a play titled The Pharaoh's Daughter. This was a major production that changed the course of history. The pharaoh was portrayed as Black, the daughter was Black, all the actors were Black, and when the world saw this play, African diaspora became fascinated with Afrocentrism. This later inspired movements like the Nation of Islam. He later moved to the US and then Nigeria, where he continued writing, traveling, and organizing intellectual conferences and building Pan-African, Pan-Islamic networks. He didn't claim that ancient Egypt and ancient Sudan civilization belonged to all Africans. His work aimed at restoring dignity and rightful place to African civilizations in world history.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your shit. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise." Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.